In any case, my name is John Wihbey again. I'm an associate professor here at Northeastern and work with Mike and the team on the research project. I'm really thrilled about this panel for a whole variety of reasons. But we're gonna talk about a hot button issue, which is AI in media. And I'm sure lots of you will have views or questions, so I hope we can really open up a robust dialogue in the allotted time that we have. Just a few words about sort of the topic that we're going to cover, and just so you have a little bit of sense of the history. So lots of media organizations were using forms of machine learning, which we would consider kind of classical AI, roughly from the early 2000s even till the 2000 teens. And then Google DeepMind publishes a paper about the transformer algorithm, which then becomes commercialized, and then in November of 2022 we see the generative models start to roll out. So there's kind of a period which we could refer to as kind of like the classical AI period, which is mostly about like clustering stuff. So it's used in lots of different kinds of data-informed platforms. And then this new thing, which is like actually generating text and images and even video. Just so we kind of have a sense of like the terms. So generative AI, kind of classical AI, and the technical experts within the university would have lots of different subcategories within all of that. But in any case, I want to now introduce our two guests and get right to their really cool presentations. So David Cohn is Advanced Digital Senior Director, works a lot on generative AI innovation for content in the Newsroom. Welcome, David. And Meghan Murphy is the Online News Association Director of Programs. And I'm going to let them kind of introduce themselves and tell you about what they do. And Meghan, I think you're going to go first. And thank you.
Thanks, John. Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for having me. It's great to be here. I have a couple introductory slides to get through here to talk about AI and what you should be thinking about. First, I'll give you a little bit of background about me. I was born and raised in this area in a tiny town called Holliston near Framingham, if anybody knows this area. I went to UMass, Amherst, went to J School at UMass, moved to DC for about 12 years, and found my way into community engagement in some big DC media organizations. I moved back here in 2020 to this area, so really happy to have this going on right in my backyard this week. So for the last 9 years or so, I've been leading training and networking programs for journalists at the Online News Association. I know some of you in the room are familiar. We have some members in the room. I'll just give a really brief introduction for people who aren't. So we are an organization for change makers in newsrooms, for people who are thinking, we could be doing things differently. We could be using emerging technology in more interesting ways. We could be doing our work better and stronger and serving our communities in different ways, and are excited about that future and interested in it. Our board president, Charo Enriquez, affectionately calls us folks the little green Martians in a lot of newsrooms. Sometimes some of you might have felt that way in the past. Phil, I think you called it earlier, the people who, what did you say? It's not weird enough for me. Oh, yeah. Those are O&A folks, right? Like it's got to get weirder. It's got to get more interesting. There's a lot of potential here. So a lot of our members are in this moment right now around AI, and I think this year I'm getting this question a little bit less often, but I still do get it. Why are we focusing on AI? Why would we care about this? It's coming for all of our jobs. The robots are going to get us. And I'm going to give you just like my kind of take on this, and I'm excited for later when we'll maybe have some discussion if anybody has feelings about this too. The first thing is it's happening. It's already here. Whether or not you pay attention to it, whether or not you engage with it, it's going to happen. It's changing the way that people access information and absorb information already. We have had some moments in journalism in the past where we have not really taken seriously some of these inflection moments, and we've missed opportunities, and we've let things, when we bury our heads in the sand, it comes anyway. the tide comes in anyway. So my feeling is always more learning is better. Understanding it, even if you don't want to use it in particular ways, understanding it will never be a bad thing for you. The second thing is I want people who have the ethics and the backgrounds and the expertise and the care for their communities that journalists do to be at the table making decisions about how this technology works and not just letting it go. And then also, I know there's a lot of students in the room and lots of people from newsrooms too. There are a handful of news organizations that have a team lead or a team, including David, which we're going to talk about that in a minute, who are focused on AI. There are many, many, many more who don't. And whether you get that role formally or informally, if you can make that role for yourself, you're going to make yourself really valuable to your team and your organization. There are certain things that AI cannot do, like making context, making meaning, building relationships with your coworkers, helping people understand complex topics that you can do for your newsroom. And it's a really big opportunity to provide value and make yourself indispensable in an interesting way. So I'm going to focus on that aspect of things, the kind of like if you're the only one in your newsroom feeling this way, or maybe your newsroom is starting to go down this path and you want to take more of a leadership role in it. I'm going to give you a couple of ideas for how to get started there. There are obviously a lot of considerations that come up around generative AI when it comes to ethics and privacy, data security, things like that. These things are really important to keep in mind, and it shouldn't stop us from engaging with this altogether. We shouldn't be scared away from it because there are some difficult topics to dive into, and we should be diving into them together. Okay, so just a couple of ways to think about getting started. The first one is obviously to learn about the capabilities and to educate yourself. A ton of people who are in positions of leadership around AI in newsrooms right now are self-taught. And there's a lot of resources out there to help you do that. Building AI, generative AI into your habits and practices. And I mean, at work, at home, I'll give you some ideas there. And then really crucially, talk to your colleagues and your audience about AI. So the first one is learn. This is a list of some starting resources. I'm a person, I think probably a lot of you being journalists in the room are people who you kind of want to create your media ecosystem to educate when you're trying to get into a topic more deeply. These are a whole bunch of resources that you can check out. There's a whole bunch more. If you have more to add to this list, I'm going to put my contact info at the end. I'd love to hear from you on that. O&A and lots of other organizations are hosting trainings around AI all the time. We see it as our role in this industry to get people the skills that they need. I'm hearing tons of people who are saying, I went to a coffee shop on weekends and kind of self-taught myself all of this kind of stuff, and that's awesome if you can do that. We want to help you get there if you need to build this into your practice a little bit more. So we have tons of training sessions. A lot of them are over Zoom. We do an annual conference that in the fall too, that's going to be in New Orleans this year. We're going to have tons of AI programming at that. So our website will get you a lot more information. And there's also tons of programs out there, fellowship programs and educational programs that are cropping up around AI that you can check out. Okay, so the next one is practice, and this is my favorite because you can read and listen and you can consume all the information you want, but if you're not practicing and playing with the technology, most of us learn by doing. So building it into your daily habits is going to be really important for understanding what it does well, what it does not do well, and what you should not rely on it for, what works best for which tasks. And you're only going to get there by practicing. So a couple of ways that I like to use this that you can think about is when you're trying to unstick creative block. I've done this around blog posts. Ever since college, I've been awful at writing headlines. I have always struggled with that. It gets me unstuck, and I don't use what it comes out with. Sometimes it's kind of silly and ridiculous, but I might take pieces of it. You can use it for things like meal planning. You can use it for things like gift buying, anything where you're kind of stuck on a problem. This particular prompt is one that I actually really used, and it came up with a whole bunch of kind of sketchy e-commerce sites that I would never put my credit card information into. But what it did was it gave me a couple of ideas that I could go search on Etsy and look for local vendors that would get the gift that would work. And so it kind of gave me, it was like having a thought partner. Another place that most of us have been is in job application processes. Generative AI can be really good in digesting big amounts of information and becoming a kind of thought partner for you on things. I've had people tell me that they've used it to help them prep for big pitches to their bosses. You can use it to help you prep for interviews. You can put the job description into, your tool of choice. Try a couple of them, see if they come back with different things, and have it come up with some interview questions for you. And practice responding to those, and maybe you can even put answers back in and have it give you follow-up questions and kind of have a conversation. And it's not going to be able to predict what the hiring manager is going to ask, of course, but it's going to give you an opportunity to practice your talking points and figure out, oh, that's a really good thing, I need to make sure to mention that. Sort of like having a kind of smart friend who has read the job description and is going to do a mock interview with you. So thinking about things where you could use like a little bit of conversation and you're driving your colleagues or your family or your roommate or whatever crazy. Studying up on an issue, this is one that I'm really excited about for news context. Lots of times people who are focused in specific beats in our industry build up expertise over many, many years, and it makes it sometimes hard to collaborate between different perspectives and points of view. AI can help, is really, really good at looking for patterns and information and data, and it can help you study up on a topic that you might be interested in. So say you're working on a story that you're a climate reporter or environmental reporter, and you're looking at urban development data, and that's a really in-depth topic to try and figure out that you might need years to develop relationships around. AI can sometimes help you study and summarize that so that you can get the core information. I've used it for, this is a big report that came out last year that was talking about trends around AI and news, and everybody was talking about it. It's like a 46-page report. And I used it as sort of a study buddy, like asking it questions, and it would come up with examples from the text that I could then go in and check out the context and read more. This is a tool, a screenshot from a tool called Chat PDF. This is a video specific example. This is a video journalist named Alex Clark who we did a session with last year. And I'll put the link to it in the last slide too, but this link will take you to the Zoom recording if you want to watch it. He showed how to use Claude to take research notes and transcripts, interview transcripts, and create a pitch document for for all the freelancers out there to create a video project pitch document, which was really cool. So the last thing that I want to encourage you to do is to talk about this with your newsroom and audience. I think a lot of time people are scared to bring it up because they feel like nobody else is thinking about it. You might find that more people are than you think. Does your newsroom have an AI policy? Does your student newsroom have an AI policy? Should it? Do you want to be part of crafting that? Do you want to be part of updating that? Because it's going to need to be updated a lot. This technology is changing really quickly. Can your audience read it and understand it and engage with it? You can take the lead in making this happen. A lot of newsrooms do have these now, but there's a lot of opportunity now to be at the table for these conversations. There's an organization called Trusting News that hopefully some of you have heard of. They're amazing. They do great work about looking into how journalists and audiences can build trust together. And we worked with them on this project last year that looked at how newsrooms could build trust by talking about their use of AI. And this is my favorite part of it. They found that 4 out of 5 of the audience members that this project spoke with thought that would like to see their local journalists helping them understand what AI is and how it works, and that they saw this as a key opportunity to build trust. So talking to your audience about this can be really powerful too. And then host like play and practice sessions with your team. A lot of the time I've heard of teams that sort of try out exercises together, compare notes, see what works and what doesn't, and if people get different results, and could we use this in this context, and have these conversations. You could do it over a brown bag lunch or something like that. Get with a group of friends who are interested in this and practice together and see what you like about it and what you don't.
While that's loading up, the first slide is just about me, so I'll just sort of start telling you. My background is in journalism. I was a tech reporter, actually, for many years. And then I slowly moved over to the product side. And I've worked in kind of the intersection of technology and media for about 20 years. The closest thing that I ever did in broadcast, actually, I helped launch something called AJ Plus through Al Jazeera. That was like 10 years ago now. For the last few years, I've been part of the research and development team for Advance Local. Advance is a local media news publisher. Mass Live in Massachusetts, NJ.com, Cleveland Plain Times Dealer, about 12 regional markets. We built something called Subtext, which lets news organizations text with their audience, but for the last 2 years, it's been very heavy in generative AI, as you might guess. Actually, that was something the AJ Plus folks made for me on my birthday one year. All right, but let's talk about artificial intelligence, or generative AI. First, I wanted to get a few kind of big claims or statements out of the way. This is a famous painting by an artist named Magritte, and underneath it, it says in French, "This is not a pipe." And the reason why it's a famous painting is because he's kind of playing with you, because it obviously is a pipe, but he's also correct. It's not a pipe. It's a painting of a pipe. And that was kind of his, ooh, I'm an artist moment. But the reason I bring it up is because it's a good metaphor when you're engaging with artificial generative AI. It is a conversation, but it's really not. It's the representation of a conversation. So when you are engaging with artificial intelligence and you feel like you got an answer, you're actually getting the statistical representation of an answer. And those are two very different things. And I always think it's important to keep that in mind when you're engaging with generative AI. Another big metaphor that I like to give to the reporters early on when I'm going from newsroom to newsroom and talking about this is, think of generative AI as going from using a handsaw to a chainsaw. And you can cut down a tree with a handsaw. You can cut down that same tree with a chainsaw, and it is going to be a lot faster and a lot easier to cut it down. But you still need to have both hands on that chainsaw and actually be hyper aware of what you're doing, right? Because if you're using a handsaw and it brushes against your leg, it's sort of like, maybe you'll get a cut, but you'll be all right. If a chainsaw brushes against your leg, it's going to ruin your day, right? So you have to be even more aware of when you're using a chainsaw, which is how I would argue you can think of generative AI. Again, we're just talking big picture stuff before I go into some of the cool stuff that we're doing with it in the newsrooms. A question that I get a lot is, will bots replace journalists? And my answer is an emphatic no, at two different levels. One, at the micro level, right? I would say, just as yesterday's social media editor is today's senior vice president of audience, right? There's an entire career path that didn't exist 30 years ago, but starting 10 years ago or 15 years ago, people started getting into newsrooms in newfangled, roles that have now matured. I would argue that, again, at the micro level for the individual, people can learn this skill, and that can become a valuable trait for you as an individual. Meghan was just talking about different ways you can learn it and become valuable to your own newsroom. But I would even say at the macro level, I think actually generative AI will create more jobs than it destroys. And I could explain that a little bit further if we want in the question and answer part of it, but I actually think it will be a job creator, net job creator in the long term. But I also want to put a provocative thought out there, which is that one of the things that generative AI kind of proposes is the idea that content production drops. I sort of say to zero here, but the price of content production drops. It's now easier to create a video, it's easier to create audio, it's easier to create text. And for a long time, journalists, I think, have thought their value is, the value I bring is I write, for us it'd be I write an article, or for you is I'd make a video, right? And so it feels like, well, if the value of that drops, what's happening? But I want to go back to, let's go 100 years ago. 100 years ago, it was very common for journalists to work in pairs. One was the reporter, would go to City Hall, probably use the word Mac, and knew everybody, right, wore a fedora and was scribbling down notes. And that person would call in to another person who was at the desk and was clicking and clacking away on a typewriter. And the writer probably couldn't report at all. And it was often the case that the reporter could not write themselves out of a paper bag, right? Now, for the last, we'll call it 40 years, that's been one role, right? And in fact, it's been increasingly one role. It used to be just, now I'm the reporter and the writer. Now I'm the reporter, writer, and the video editor. Now I'm the reporter, the writer, video editor, and the social media, right? And so really what generative AI represents is actually pulling back away some of those things, which means emphasis should be put back on what we would call shoe leather reporting. Emphasis is on the humanity element of it. Can you get me something new? Do you have the relationships with the right people? Will they come to you? Do you understand the community and what is going to be the new information that will ultimately lead to content production? But the content production is not the hard part in this. And I'm not saying that generative AI does all that now, but there's a theoretical future where the content production is no longer the hard part. The hard part is, do you have those relationships, right? Are you a good shoe leather reporter, essentially? So again, that's a sort of provocative thought. Even in a sort of like what's a Death Star scenario, I think there is still value for journalists. It's actually a return back to an older value, which has actually been an ongoing theme in terms of how I apply generative AI in our newsrooms. I'm actually often find myself looking back at older projects or older movements or endeavors in journalism and saying, how do we rethink this in a world of generative AI, right? Like hyperlocal. Hyperlocal was a buzzword from, I don't know, we'll call it 2009 to 2014, I don't know, somewhere around there, right? And the entire movement, the journalism all moved to hyperlocal. And again, it's buzzwordy, but it eventually kind of shut down. And I actually think, under generative AI, maybe hyperlocal is interesting again, right? Citizen journalism, I never liked the phrase citizen journalism, but the idea that the audience can and should be involved in the process of our reporting and making our reporting more transparent to them. I think that there's a lot of power to that, but we sort of moved away from that as an industry for, again, a lot of practical reasons along of how much work it was, right? Advanced Local, the organization I work for, shut down comments, for example, I don't remember how many years ago, because it was just too much to moderate, right? Now, comments is not citizen journalism, but that's a step in that direction, right? Like now, actually, generative AI can moderate comments pretty well. In which case maybe it makes sense to rethink not just comments, posting at the end of an article, but what that means more, and I'll talk about that in a moment. So that's kind of the general philosophy that I've been applying is I'm just rethinking about just even old things and saying, how do we redo those or rethink them, or are they more valuable again in a world where, again, the cost of production or the cost of certain things has come down. So I'm working mostly on 3 different kinds of endeavors. One is tools to enhance workflow. This is tools for reporters, experiences for the audiences. And the third one is leveraging data in new and unique ways, which in truth kind of underlies the other two more and more I'm finding. So we're going to talk about the other tools for reporters and experiences for audiences. The first thing that we started creating, and I'm sure you've all heard of different versions of this, we call it the Reporter's Toolkit. And I think it's very much in the spirit of what Meghan was talking about. What I always tell the reporters is this is not meant to give you the thing, right? I'll show you an example where you get headlines. It's not meant to give you the headlines. It's meant to be a creative partner in creating headlines. It may be the case that it's like, it nailed it, right? But often the case, and what I hear more and more is, oh, it put me on the path, right? It kind of gave me the first few words in a headline that got me there quicker, lighter, faster, easier, and it lowered the mental tax of creating those headlines, right? And if you have to create a bunch of headlines in a day and each one is a little mental tax, if we reduce that mental tax down to 20% of what it used to be, all of a sudden you've got a little bit more room to do other more meaningful work. Again, maybe it's that I'm going to call up a source. I'm going to do that more repertorial stuff. So again, this is an example of our Reporter's Toolkit. This is an internal tool, so it's not meant to look beautiful. And it actually just starts with one of these. And if you click Headline Create, I'll show you what you get. But you can also, if you click into Editor's Eyes, I'll show you what you get as well. But editing tools leads open to this, right? So you click Editing Tools, you get a bunch of different options. Each one of these do different, I call them workflows. But they're mostly input-output, which is to say you put in an input, maybe it's your first draft, and then you get an output. Headlines. You give it your first draft, and then under Editor's Eyes, which I'll show you, you get a bunch of feedback on that first draft. Some of them are research tools, but even those can be input-output. Quote extractor. Load up the PDF you got, load up the whatever it is you got, and we'll just give you all the quotes that were mentioned in that. So you don't have to try and hunt for the quotes in some PDF, right? So these are mostly input-output kind of examples. Here's what it looks like when you click into headline create. We have a few different types of headlines. This is digital headlines. So you'd go in, you'd insert your text, right? Hey, here's my first draft. And then what you get back is 15 potential headlines, 5 that are optimized for Google Search, 5 for Google Discover, 5 for Google News. This is heavily informed by our SEO expert and other sort of larger picture things that we kind of want to keep in mind. What's great about this, again, for us at least, you can do this at an individual level, but by creating the tool, you don't have to remember the prompt. We have the prompt on the back end. It is a super lengthy, obnoxiously long prompt because we're applying it to everybody over the course of thousands of stories, right? And again, it is meant to be a creative partner. I mentioned the editor's eyes. This is a really popular one as well. So you put in your first draft and you get a quick spelling grammar check. Suggestions on writing style. So from the top to the bottom, it goes from you should really pay attention to this to this is a suggestion. This is even more like a 2-cent suggestion to like, hey, here's a thought, right? So it's meant to be like pay attention to this to like if you have time, keep going, keep going, keep going. So obviously spelling and grammar. Hey, you have a spelling error. Check that out. Versus writing style, but the editors increasingly are asking their reporters, hey, put it through editor's eyes. They get cleaner copy, and it works out better. Information gaps, again, this is highly suggestive. It's like, hey, we noticed that like this would make the story better. We don't see it. Of course, there's all kinds of reasons why it might not be there. One of the other things I really like about this, so editor's eyes is long. It's got more. You end up getting a kind of score on 6 different criteria. How well does the story inform? It's 0 through 5. This one was very informative. How well does the story connect? 1.5. How well does it explain? 2.0. I borrowed this from Rodney Gibbs, by the way, from ONA. He knows I stole it, but how well does it, is the story investigative? How well does it enrich? How well does it provoke, right? It's not meant to tell the reporter like, hey, you did a bad job on this, right? It's just often what I hear, and this is the case, right? Like inform and investigate often are at odds with each other, right? Inform is kind of like, you usually get a 5 on a breaking news, right? Versus, other things. And then what we do is we actually create, these are pretend headlines to future stories that would be strong in areas where the story was weak. So if you were weak on Connect, hey, here are headlines of future stories that would be stronger in Connect. Again, it's not to say this is it's not assigning a story to the editor. It's saying, hey, if this is your beat, here's a headline that would be interesting on the Connect element, that would score higher on Connect. So again, it's just meant to be suggested. It's highly suggestive here. This is, take it with a grain of salt, but these are ideas for future stories, right? That's editor's eyes. And again, we have a bunch of workflows, as you saw. We're making more all the time based off of feedback. Another really exciting thing that you can do with generative AI. This one, the last one I mentioned, the editors love. This one, the reporters love. Cron jobs. Cron meaning chronological. It's spelled like that on purpose wrongly. But what is a cron job? It is just what we would call maybe an AI agent. It goes out to a website at a timed interval, a chronological interview. Daily, we have some that look at the website every hour, between certain hours. And it looks and it says, hey, last time I was here, this was the headline. Now I'm here and this is the headline. It's a new headline. I'm going to report back to the editor, to the reporter and say, hey, there's a new headline here. That's a simple way of putting it. Examples of use cases, right? We send a cron job out every morning to the New Jersey Appellate Court of, the Judicial Appellate Court, and we say, hey, what are the appellate rulings today? And we see which ones of them, what the ruling was, how it was overturned. We look at the case details, and then we come back to the reporter, and you can see it here, right? Here's the case name. This is a Slack update. Here's the case name. Here was the thing, the details, and it was affirmed, right? So what used to take the court reporters every morning looking at the 10 appellate court decisions, it would take them 45 minutes to an hour to like look at each one. I have to go into the PDF, look at this long, I don't know. Again, I haven't been a reporter in a while. When I look at these PDFs, I'm like, oh my God, who wants to read that? And it just gives you a 2-sentence summary. Is this, and then it's up to them to decide, and again, affirmed are usually the ones they ignore. It's when there's, I forget the phrase, when it's appealed or overruled or overturned. I forget the keyword that they're always looking for. But when they see that, they're like, oh, I want to see that summary. Maybe that's a case I've been following. We have lots and lots of these. They can be quick alerts. So in Syracuse, we're just tracking the state trooper. Just say, hey, the state troop E, their state troops are A, B, C, D, E. I forget which ones we're tracking, but here's the latest from the state trooper. We scrape those every hour, right? So here's this happened, and it's just a quick alert to the breaking news team. Some we put into structured information. These are warn notices. Whenever there's a layoff in a state, every state has its own website, which makes it harder for me to cross all the different websites. Each one's different. But you say, hey, there was a layoff notice given in Ohio, and here it is, right? So in this case, the reporters wanted it back in a more of a structured kind of manner, so they quickly see it, gather it, and decide again if they want to turn it into a story or not. But you can also actually even present this as a first draft. Again, there is this world where the cost of production drops to zero. Nothing, by the way, I should say, nothing is ever published directly. This is not meant to be like published on the website. There's this phrase, human on the loop. We always kind of abide by that. But so it can be sent as a first draft. It's more so that it goes to the reporter in the language that they communicate in, rather than to say like this should be published. In fact, this one I picked a Mass Live one. I think this is the. I think it's Maynard is in Massachusetts. Yeah. And this is another Mass one, but I wanted to show what it looks like in Slack. Every morning we look at the life sentence parole decisions, and if someone gets a parole decision on their life sentence, we say, this one came in the other day, March 19th, yeah. Parole's been granted, here's the case, here's the more details, right? And it's for the, I forget which beat that person is on. Finally, transcriptions. We built our own in-house transcription tool. Why? A lot of folks use Otter AI. A lot of our folks were using Otter AI. For journalistic reasons, Otter AI is not always ideal. They will not protect your sources. They do seem to claim some ownership over the content, and they might be using it to train their own LLM. That last part I don't totally know. But so we decided to build our own. The short version, again, this is an internal tool, so it looks ugly on purpose. Not on purpose, but it looks good enough to use for an internal tool. You can upload your own audio and get a transcription of it. And we can also upload YouTube videos and get the transcript from there. And then you can add a little extra spice to it where you can say, hey, give me a summary of this transcript, or let me ask a question of that transcript, or there's more interesting things that you can, again, the input is the transcript. What the output is, we can change, right? We can say, what kind of output do you want? And we can also combine those all together. So I mentioned, one of the things we're doing is we are actually watching certain YouTube channels, like the Newark, New Jersey City Council. They upload their meetings to YouTube. When we see a new one, we take the transcript, we put it in our transcript tool, we get the transcript, and then we say, from this transcript, here's what I want you to send to the reporter, a summary of it, right? So, main topics, here are the main topics, and then, usually it includes some key quotes or whatever, right? So it goes from, it was uploaded to YouTube, our cron job noticed it, got the transcript, and then did a summary of the transcript and sent it to the reporter. Experiences for audience. We talked about the other one. This is a little bit shorter, but again, this is now for the public, right? So one of the things that we are doing and actually launching, it'll be, I think, pretty soon even more public than it is now, is text to speech, but it is not reading the text, right? Because again, we deal mostly with written stories, right? But they are not written for the ear. So what we're actually doing is taking 5 different stories of that day, giving it to an AI and saying, hey, give me like an NPR style, like a radio version of this. And then turning that into a, hey, you give me 5 minutes, we'll give you New Jersey kind of vibe, right? And again, if you think about it, like they almost all start, the AI does this, it says, they almost always start with good morning and, right? But no one would ever write good morning in there, right? So text to speech as we have known it is just reading the words, but that never actually works to the ear. And you guys know this probably better than most people, right? Because it's probably the same for video, right? So again, it's taking it, transforming the nature of it. This is one I'm really excited about as well. Feedback loop. I mentioned earlier, hey, can we rethink the way the audience participates with us? So we do a call out for community input. Hey, everybody, tell us what you think about the marijuana legislation in Texas, right? We get 500 comments from that. In the past, that would have been one person's job to like look through all those comments and try and like figure out what's the thing, what's going on. But now generative AI can kind of produce, we'll call it again a summary. That's the input. It's 500 inputs in this case. And then we can publish that output, right, in a way that informs the audience and shows them that their contribution was meaningful, right? One of the failures of asking the audience for input is if you don't show the output. What's the value to them, right? The reason why people share their personal lives with Facebook is because it makes their experience of Facebook better. No one gives news organizations any information about their personal lives because it never improves their experience, right? This is one step towards that. Here's a quick video that kind of shows how it works. So this is a spreadsheet that had all those answers about legislation in tech. I think this is legislation. Yeah. Oh no, this was general voting. What issues are bringing you to the voting booth? Theme 1, voter motivations. This was earlier in the last year, right? Migrants and border security. A description of what that theme was, and then comments that best exemplified that theme. So just to go back to it, what you're seeing is it looks at 500, 600 comments and it says, hey, I'm noticing 5 themes. Like these 5 come up like maybe 50 times each or something like that. One of them was migrants and border security. And here's a description of that theme as I can see it being mentioned over and over again. And here are some comments that best kind of exemplify that larger theme. So again, there's one theme. We'll see what the second theme was. A second theme was inflation, right? So a bunch of people mentioned inflation. What does that mean? Here are some example comments of it. Theme 5 was climate change, and you can run it, a few times if you want. You see if there's variety. Usually you'll get the same, kind of overlapping themes each time. We did do this for Texas, though. I didn't make that up. And here you can see, right, like medical benefits and health, right? That was, we asked, what are your thoughts on marijuana legislation in Texas and what are your concerns? One of them was medical and benefits. Another one was economic and legal considerations. Another one was social justice, right? And you can see this article used artificial intelligence to summarize the main themes and sentiments expressed in the comments received by Lone Star Live. There is lots more. There's an interesting space between between search and chat, which I think is, the next sort of, like when we talk about user experience right now, everybody talks about chats, like you probably get those chat bots. I actually think that is not the user interface, the ultimate user interface that this stuff will resolve to. I think we're sort of in the AOL chat room user experience stage of things. And you can think of if who's old enough to who at least knows what AOL chat rooms are or experienced them, right? So if you remember that was social media. We didn't call it social media. We eventually found the user interface of social media in Twitter and Facebook. And the difference between AOL chat rooms and what we now call social media, I think we are in the AOL chat rooms interface. The user interface era is that. So that's another thing to keep in mind. The end.
That was great. That was really great. Thank you, David. Just a couple quick reactions, and then maybe a quick question for each of you, and let's open it up. I hope you have lots of questions or comments. First of all, ONA, Online News Association, is like one of the most important institutions we have in journalism. So if you are not a member or you're not at least like lurking around their website and their social offerings, you definitely should do that. And thanks for everything you're doing. Here's just a quick question, Megan. Like in sort of innovation theory, we talk about sort of early adopters and late adopters. And I'm wondering if you had to put a number on like among working journalists, like how many would you characterize as like what percentage are robustly engaged with AI tools in newsrooms right now?
It's hard to put a number on this because the people who come to us are sort of raising their hands, right? But I will say that in 2023, so we have an annual conference every year, and we try to kind of put our finger on what's coming next and have it be a place that people can think about what are you going to be worrying about in your job over the next couple of years, and how can we help you make sense of it and find some other people who are also going to be up at night over this. And so we've done some AI sessions over the years. In 2023, we had a whole bunch of AI sessions, and we got a whole bunch of pushback from people. Why so much AI? This is a fad. It's another thing that we have to be paying attention to, and it's a waste of time. And we disagreed, and so 6 months later we kind of announced this like broader year-round initiative to focus on it, and we got very few complaints 6 months later about, you guys are focusing too much on AI, why are you doing this? And again, it's a little bit of like self-fulfilling, but I do think that people are hearing about this. I mean, like, how many of you who have family and friends who are non-journalists, hopefully you have lots of those who are outside of the journalism space, who like are asking you about AI, or who are talking about AI? Like, my parents are asking me about it. It's really, everybody's talking about it. And so I think more and more people are sort of like, oh, this might be something that I need to pay attention to. But in terms of like who's really engaging with it, it's still a small number. So I think there's an opportunity to set yourself apart if this is something that you're really interested in, and like I say, to like really help people make sense of it. And sometimes it can be a really unpopular opinion. Actually, so ONA was founded in the late 90s, and at the time it was an unpopular opinion to think that there was something to this internet thing that was sort of a fad at the time. And lots of people thought it was a waste of time. It was just for cat videos, and it is an excellent place for cat videos, by the way, but it's also for real journalism. And there were a handful of journalists that were sort of like, we think we can do real journalism with this, and people will trust it, and people will engage with it. And they found each other and started ONA, and this was like December 1999. And so, I think sometimes when you raise your hand and you start talking to other people about it, you might find more people who care about it. So, you're putting it on the map for more people. Does that kind of answer?
That's great. And David, that was a real tour de force. I'm still thinking through a lot of, I really loved the revisiting of old trends too. I thought that was brilliant, and I hadn't seen that, so kudos. Quick question for you, and then we'll open it up. So I think a lot of people are here knowing that they should experiment, and there's obviously ChatGPT, there's Anthropic Claude, there's the Gemini family from Google, there's DeepSeek, XAI is like has made some headlines lately. What would you advise in terms of models to experiment with? Not everyone's lucky enough to have you beside them, like custom making tools, and I'm just curious.
Well, so two things. One, we as a shop are LLM agnostic, meaning there are some things where we use ChatGPT or OpenAI. There are some where we use Claude. There are some where we use Gemini. It really depends on what it is we're trying to do and what will get the job done, because there are slight differences between them. There are certain things like Gemini I think is actually underrated because it's actually really cheap, and there are certain things where it's like, if I can get this done with Gemini, I'll do it with Gemini. It's cheaper, right? That's, again, in workflows where you kind of chain the LLMs together. So, for example, I use a tool called Mind Studio, and that lets me pick between the LLMs I want to use. The other thing I would stress, not exactly your question, but it is important to stress, which is your ability, it is related, your ability to choose these. This is what makes generative AI really, really interesting for journalism in particular. If you look at the history of computing, it has gone from more esoteric to less esoteric in your ability to interact with it. It used to be like an entire room with like a big, computer that was the size of a wall, and you needed a punch card, and it was, then it became, oh, this mouse, I can move a cursor. It looks like my finger. It's not my finger, but it looks like my finger. Eventually it becomes your finger, right? And now we're at the point where we can engage with computers using our own natural language, our own natural spoken language. And so people who are good with language, you could argue, would be better at computers eventually. And if you can think of an industry of people who are good at communicating, you let me know, right? No, that's the joke, right? I think journalists are in a position to end up being really better at using LLMs. Which LLM will depend on, again, which job you want to get done, and you'll be actually, because they're interacting back with you in natural language, you'll be able to, again, our ability to communicate, assuming that we've honed that better than other professions, would put us in a position where we can leverage it better than other positions.
Great. All right, let's open it up for comments.
I'll run the mic.
Yeah, thank you.
Who are you going to? Who'd you pick?
We know you, Caleb, all too well. You get second question.
Perfect.
Hi. First of all, love. Am I underneath the speaker or something? Okay.
Turn that off. But, I just turned it off. Yeah.
Love AJ
so
Plus.
he's good.
Love Max Live. erosion of trust is a big, we've been talking about trust all day, right? Video used to be proof of something.
It went right underneath.
Right, video used to mean proof, and with generative AI, it doesn't, obviously. And then you mentioned using a chat bot to moderate comments, and how do we know that those comments aren't also AI, dead internet theory?
Totally.
So, anything you have to say about that?
Testing. Oh, so one, I love that you use the word proof of, because I have another slide of controversial hot takes or things. One element of it is, that I didn't include in this is I don't think, I'll use print instead. I'm not saying that print is going to become the savior or make a huge comeback, but the value of something like print actually increases in a world where, in a dead internet theory kind of world, right? Because there's a cost of production to putting something, because of the industrial nature of print, right? So again, in fact, I like in Bitcoin, they talk about proof of work. Proof of trust, right, is you have to spend energy to get that proof, right? So I think anywhere where you can prove the energy required to accomplish something, which is very difficult in something like comments, to your point. I think that's actually an astute point, right? Because it's garbage in, garbage out. And if you can't prove that the stuff coming in isn't garbage, then you can't prove the stuff coming out isn't garbage. So I do think that we are gonna, if we're gonna get dark for a moment, right? I don't know if we as a society, or maybe even as a species, are prepared for the level of, I'll use the phrase, information war that is possible now, right? Because my ability to judge whether or not I'm getting a scam email from a prince who is pretty good, right? But my ability to discern between a fake or a real voice that sounds like my mom, that's really difficult. And that is emotional in a different way. So yeah, that is scary. I don't know if there's a silver bullet. I do actually think that, just like email spam sounded really scary, right, at one time, and now it's kind of like a whatever. There is a possibility that we get like that, right, our ability to filter out. But that's not a guarantee. So I don't know. That is a question yet to be answered in full.
I have one quick thing to add to that, which is I think with video and visuals in particular, our brains are not evolved to question in the same way yet. They haven't caught up with the technology. I remember when Sora came out, there were some demo, or when it was announced before it came out, there were some demo videos, and I watched them and I was like, I can't tell. And then I realized, oh, that cat has 4 legs. But if I was scrolling through my feed and I'm seeing this stuff, I'm not picking up on that. So it's another place where I think we're in a really good position, because we have the subject matter expertise, years and years of editing and understanding how images work and things like that. And also the skepticism that journalists have, it is a superpower in this sense, that we can actually help audiences with this, and we can help make sense of things. And this is what I mean about, if we don't know that that's possible, if you haven't played around with 11 Labs and heard how realistic those voices are and how they're still just a tiny bit uncanny, you're not going to be able to see those things in time. And we did a session last year that I loved with a photojournalist from the Globe and Mail, who basically taught us how to hone that skill of, I was like, you were the guy who saw the coffee cup on the Game of Thrones episode, weren't you? And he was like, yeah, that's me. I drive my wife crazy in every movie. I'm not that person. And so his argument was basically, this is a skill that we can learn, and journalists are really, really good at this already. So we can develop these skills, and it's gonna come, the bad actors are going to be using it. So we should be ready to meet the moment. Okay, Nick, I'll stop there.
Yeah, so David, I'm just wondering, what are your models trained on? The custom models that you're building, what data are they being trained on?
So they're not models. They are, again, they're using, OpenAI or it's more like the prompt behind them is custom. So, and again, there are lots of tools like this, and again, most of them are no code. A lot of what I've built, I would say 80% of it anybody can build. Or no, none of you can build it. I'm stupid. No, I'm serious. About 80% of it is like you don't need to know a lick of code. The trick is, again, being able to communicate, and actually what tools like Mind Studio, another one is called N8N. N, the letter 8, and then N. Another one is Gumloop is another one. It allows you to put prompts next to each other. So you say the first prompt is, hey, based off these headlines, like, I'll use editor's eyes. Hey, based off this, just give me if there are any spelling errors, right? Save that. And it saves that. And then say, now look at it and tell me if there's any information gaps. Save that. Tell me if there's any writing. And then at the end, present them all in a row, right? So it's actually the ability to chain prompts, prompt chaining. You're still using the baseline LLM that is provided to you via the APIs of OpenAI, which is ChatGPT or whatever. But now you can funnel that in different, you can pipe it wherever you want, which is pretty cool.
Hello. Oh, testing. Nice. Hi. So I'm doing a effort to get more creators across all our markets at NBC to be making more short-form content. And I want to make things easier. And I like when things are easier. I like where you're going with this. So, is there any video tools or services that you recommend that use AI that they can use now that might be either cheap or free, etc.? Anything like that?
One, I know there's a bunch, and there's one, and it's so I have one, but it's a friend of mine. So it's called Augie, AUGIE, and I don't remember the exact URL, but like Augie Video Maker. But if you there are tons out there. I will say the challenge to making a good video via AI is the images. You need to have those images ahead of time. Like we could in theory do it, but we as a policy, our organization does not use generative images. And so it has to be images that we have, right, to make it like a Ken Burns thing. But because we're a little bit more of a traditional, we're not a broadcast, we're sort of print, like we might have 3 photos, but if you use 3 photos in a Ken Burns style video that goes 30 seconds, that's a real boring video. So we don't really explore it, but there are a lot of tools. Again, Augie is one. There are others. So I don't know if there's a bunch.
I'll add one more, which is Nota, N-O-T-A. It's for, it does a lot of great audience engagement types of, and SEO and types of things like that, but it can take a text story or content and images and turn it into a social video. And so, yeah.
Hi there. So there's AI is incredibly powerful, but with that power comes a lot of, there's large environmental impacts of using AI and using these, LLMs and running these servers. How can journalists ethically, balance, exploring this technology, integrating it more in their newsrooms to, make their newsrooms work better, at the same time balancing those environmental costs and not causing, more environmental harm?
I love this question. Thank you for asking it. I am really happy that there has been a lot of good journalism investigating the practices of, what does it cost environmentally to do data storage and to run these programs, and we should be doing a lot more of that. I would say that it's a balance. Like every other thing that you do operationally, your impact on this really important thing that affects everybody, the climate, and we're not separate from that because we're journalists. We're, if like your newsroom has people driving their cars to return to office and polluting the air, if your newsroom has people, driving around to cover stories, printing, data storage, all of these kinds of things, and even like newsroom waste. And things like that, like your office waste, like this should be something that is considered in the context of all of that. So I think it's getting a lot of attention, and rightfully so, and we should keep holding the feet to the fire of the organizations that are making the decisions around this. And it's definitely something that we should be thinking about the impact of what we do across all of these different things as news organizations. And we should be having these conversations more. I can't sit here and say like don't use it because it's bad for the planet, just like I couldn't say don't drive to cover your stories because that's part of the mission of what you do, you know. I will say that like newsrooms are thinking about this in really interesting ways, like on the driving front. I think it was Maine Public Radio just did a massive project where they leased an EV for their newsroom, and they had their reporters drive all over the state in the EV to cover stories and things like that. Which Maine is a huge state, as we know, that's a big deal. So, you know, just thinking about it in the broader context of the environmental impact. I don't know if you have anything to add.
No, I would say the same kind of thing, and probably, and I'd say it worse, which is like the ROI. It was a philosophy major, right? I was a philosophy major as well, so I started thinking of like, can you know, there's a utilitarian argument that like because of AI, I can do something in a place that is otherwise a news desert, right? Mm-hmm. And then it doesn't mean that the environmental cost isn't there. It just means that you're making a sort of utilitarian decision that like, well, if I don't do it, maybe I can't actually sustain a news organization in said news desert.
Maybe just one last question. Yeah. Phil, yeah.
We'll let Phil have it. Thanks for this.
I wanted to ask about your process of taking it from development through testing and validation before rolling it out. I think I've been on the test end of some projects. I've been delivered a project when it was sort of ready to roll with a wider group. And I'll admit, some of them have blown me away. And some of them I've said, gosh, if this was an employee who could do 60% of their job, we'd be having some serious conversations. Mm-hmm. At what point do you go into testing? When you have one of these ideas, it looks like you've had loads of great ideas. How do you take it from idea through testing? When do you say it's ready?
That's a great question, and I don't know if there's like a perfect answer, right? Because I think a lot of that comes down to like sort of the culture in different organizations. Before I could even get testers, there was a process of like, hey, let's just have conversations. Like, what if? Like, let's spitball ideas. Hey guys, hey. And eventually you find a few champions. And because, you know, the main thing I have found, and, you know, again, I started off as a journalist, but I've been on the product side so far that, like, I don't even recognize, you know, problems that they're having anymore. And so I need to, like, hey, what would make your life better and easier? And once you find the champions who are into it, they're the ones that articulate the problem. Testing with them, and then it is a classic jealousy. I mean, like, it's like when, just this week, we had someone put up their podcast. They uploaded their podcast to the transcription tool, used that to get blog post ideas about their podcast, and one of those turned into like the 18th most, you know, read story in the 48 hours. And so of course I was like, oh hey, that worked, and it took them like, so it's a classic. I'm trying to think of a better word than jealousy, but like FOMO. Thank you. Right. So but it's like building, you know, it's like building anything. So the foundation takes the longest time. And it feels like you're spending forever on the foundation, but if the foundation is level, then it's easier to go up. And so it's like, find the champions who are willing to be the testers, because then the tests, because they're willing participants, like, because none of this works perfect the first time. It's always like, but they're willing to put in the time to level the foundation. And then once it's level, okay, great, we can go up and like give this to the team, give this to the whole organization, right? So for me, yeah, I think it's about making the culture. And I've been lucky that within the entire news organization, there has been we are going to, like, we're not going to ignore this. This is something that, like, we are going to deal with. Not in a sloppy or lazy way, but, like, we're not going to ostrich the situation.
Okay. That was awesome. Thank you, David and Meghan. A huge round of applause for these two here.